Hey guys, John Polemy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today is Saturday evening. It's about 6 o'clock, and it's March 14th. This is the weekly market update, and an update it is. First of all, let me say that I'm feeling much better. No, I did not have the coronavirus. I had some other cold, but I appreciate there's quite a few comments, emails, suggestions. I still have some residual frog in my throat, scratchy, so I may clear my throat a few times, but I'm feeling much better now, recovered for the most part. And but I do want to thank all the well wishers. It's much appreciated. I also want to say for all the new listeners, I mean, last week's video really exploded. So I appreciate all the new listeners. Before I get into this, guys, I just want to say that this is unprecedented what we're seeing. I know I can look at my demographics and my analysis of my audience, and there's a lot of younger folks here, a lot of young guys. And you may not have been around for 2008 and saw the carnage there or the tech wreck, but what you're seeing right now is something that happens every decade or so, or it has been. Some people make the argument it's because of the Federal Reserve System and the way that because of easy money, it creates bubbles. But, I made a video before this thing popped that we were at all-time highs and that this was a bubble looking for a pin, and the coronavirus was that pin. It was a black swan. This is not what I was expecting to pop this bubble. My expectation was that, we were still running easy money around the world before this started. Before this started, this coronavirus epidemic, we were already had central banks around the world cutting rates and gold making new all-time highs in all kinds of currencies around the world. Okay? And that's going to play further into this discussion today. And I thought that, oil was moving up. It was at $65 a barrel. I thought that higher energy prices over the next couple of years would be the catalyst to force price inflation in goods, and that would cause central banks to have to raise rates and pop the bubble. But that's why they call it a black swan. You don't see it coming. And we had this virus, economies are shutting down, and we are seeing some wild stuff. So I want to get into the market update this week. We got a lot of things to talk about. Again, I'm just one man with an opinion. I try to put my unconventional thinking out there. Come at me with your criticisms, questions. I welcome it. That's how we all get better. Just make it respectful. I don't need any ankle biters. I'll just delete you. So, if you have serious questions, you got something to contribute, hey, I'll listen to it. And I don't know everything, but this is very, very unprecedented, this drop in the markets and what I consider an overreaction. But no, it doesn't matter what I think. I'll just give you a vignette. I'm working out in this rural area, and I go through this little rinky-dink town every day. And I was coming back from checking a part of a transmission line that we were building. And I said, I'm going to stop over here and get a 12-pack of Diet Pop at this Dollar General. And the whole parking lot's full of people. I can't even find a parking spot to park in the grass. What the hell is everybody doing here? Go in the joint, and of course, everybody's buying toilet paper. And there was one lady there in the line. She was getting exasperated. She said, why are all you people buying toilet paper? That doesn't have anything to do with anything. And you're overreacting. And she was pretty vocal. Everybody was just looking at her. I kind of chuckled. But again, it's the herd mentality. We've talked about this before, the emotional response. What's really going on here? And with respect to reality. We've talked about what Munger said about purging biases and emotion and really looking at the facts. And I've seen, you go on Twitter or social media and people have politicized this, H1N1 had 30 million people get it and it was like 50,000 deaths and nobody even talked about it. And now we've got something similar and everybody's going nuts. 60 to 70 million people could get this. We could have millions of deaths. Yes, it's if you, like I said before, if you have comorbidity and you're old, your risk goes up. So I'll put a website link up. It's called World Meter. They have really good information. You can actually track the daily case count. And in some countries, it's already rolled over. If you look at South Korea, it's rolled over. The new cases, China, it's rolled over. Some of these other places, as these lockdowns take effect, it takes 2 to 3 weeks, and these things roll over. And again, I'm sitting here in my office with the window closed for no sound and not my fan running, and it's already in the 80s down here with high humidity. The virus simply cannot survive in these type of conditions. So as it gets warmer, this should subside. Even if it doesn't, everybody's doing self-policing, or most people are. I mean, people that I work with aren't even in the office anymore. That's happening everywhere. Yes, it's going to have an effect on the economy, but this isn't going to end the world. We know this, so we'll get into it. I want to kind of look at this Rudyard Kipling poem, pieces of it. If you probably heard parts of this before, but I was thinking of this over this whole week during these circumstances. And it says, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings. And it goes to the end. There's many other verses, but yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So, I kind of thought about this because, like I said, I'm trying to be rational about this. I'm trying to think about it. And yes, it's bad. People are dying. It's not the Black Plague. It's not Ebola. It's not the end of the world. Okay? So, what are we really looking at here? Well, I don't know what will happen in the short term, and nobody else does either. I think that a lot of people seem to think they know, but it's really hard because you don't know how people are reacting. We don't know the effects of how locked down the economy really is. We won't really see that until the numbers come out in the next couple months. But I expect that we're going to see a worldwide recession. I'm not saying a depression, but we're going to see a recession. I mean, a lot of economic activity is being stifled. Markets are going to remain volatile, and they're going to be following the headlines of the latest coronavirus, outbreaks or clusters or whatever. So I encourage you to track this in real time because you're going to have the advantage of knowing what's really going on and not just relying on the media, which is biased. Quite frankly, the media is biased. They are have a bias towards the left and towards the Democratic Party. That's my view. And they want this president to fail. They want the economy to go down. That gives us a better chance of this election. We have an election coming up. Now, you can say whether this was handled correctly or not handled correctly. Government doesn't handle, regardless who's in there, handle things properly. But this has just been blown out of proportion if it's compared to other things, as far as the media coverage and the scare tactics and the emotional response. That's my opinion. You can have your own opinion. But that's what I think. But this is a financial podcast or video series, and so we really care about how to make money off this. Okay, people might think that's ghoulish, but we got to kill what we eat, and we got to, Daddy's got to put food on the table. So bottom line is that we're going to have a lot of volatility until this thing gets out of the news. And when it gets out of the news, it'll fade and we'll have the next thing. It's just how it is. But when you're canceling all the NHL season, the NBA season, March Madness, now the Olympics are going to, this is reverberating. There's no travel and tourism going on. It's going to reverberate. Some of these companies are very greatly in debt, so there's going to be knock-on effects. Demand is going down for many things, but also supply is going down in many areas also. We could be looking at some stagflation, low growth but high price inflation. Why? Well, think about this. After this thing's over with, I probably wouldn't want to own Kimberly Clark, who makes toilet paper, because no one's going to need to buy toilet paper for a year, the way these people are buying it. I go to Sam's Club every week and pick up like nuts and stuff, cashews, and I kind of just walk around, no water in the joint, no toilet paper in the joint. I don't know what these people are thinking about. You can still drink tap water. I don't get it. But anyway, that's how it is. And I guarantee you, after the markets drop, and very likely could drop more, people will sell at the bottom. That's what they do. They're going to start getting liquidated. And that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing The margin clerks, when you have periods of very low volatility like we've had for years and years and years, people start getting cute. They start leveraging up. I'm not just talking about individuals, but private equity firms, hedge funds, the big banks. And now you have to unwind this now. When the selling comes in these waves, like it's these huge down days, everybody has to hit the bid because the margin clerk is now the arbiter of what happens, not rationality. The margin clerk sells what can be sold. Rick Rule has talked about this many times, and this creates the opportunity for the speculator. The person that's not over leveraged, the prudent speculator, is now in a position to buy assets at less than fair value. The bargain bin. It's like walking through Walmart when they have those, 5 CDs for 99 cents at Walmart with all these movies or DVDs that, people buy in mass. It's kind of like that, right? So if you like tuna fish and normal price is $1 a can and it's selling for 20 cents a can, well, you're probably going to load up. But what's going to happen? One thing we do know is going to happen because it's already starting is every politician is running to the microphone telling everyone how they're going to fix the problem. Because as we said before, that's what politicians do, right? They don't want to just sit back and say, well, this, needs to just run its course and we'll support the hospital medical system. Oh, no, 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 no. We need physical spending. We're gonna bail out these industries. We're gonna give cash directly to people. I mean, the Fed on Friday did a $1.5 trillion repo operation over the last week, if you will. During the 2008 great financial crisis, they did something similar, but it was over an entire year, and they did the same operation in a couple days. And that's just the beginning. Trump wants to do $1 trillion. He wants to suspend payroll taxes. He wants $1 trillion stimulus. Now, do I think the Democrats give it to him? No. But I think some things are going to happen, and it's happening around the world. You can just go on Google and search for government physical spending, government bailouts of coronavirus, whatever, and you're going to get all kinds of news items from all over the world where governments are running to the microphone, spending money they don't have. And this is what I expect them to do. I mean, I expect the Federal Reserve is going to have a meeting next week. I think they're going to go straight to the zero bound. I think it's a good possibility. They're not going to they're not going to screw around. They're just going to cut and go right to the zero bound. Does that fix the problem? No, it doesn't. But it creates quite a bit of potential liquidity in the system, which can be used, which will, I believe, cause a reflation once this thing, the mother of all reflations, if you will. They will not hesitate, these governments and central banks, in printing whatever level of money they think they need to save, to be seen to doing something. And as we all know, when they do these things, they always go way above what they should. And so, if you are of the view, as I am, that the coronavirus is not going to lead to the new dark ages or a new, like the plague did in medieval Europe, then you have to look past this as the heat, it starts heating up in the northern hemisphere, and this thing's going to possibly die off just like the normal cold and flu season does. And then, you have all this liquidity and stimulus in the system, and oh boy, look out. One comment I do want to make is now we're going to really find out who the real contrarians are. Everybody says they're a contrarian, but are you going to step in and buy? This is the thing. People say, well, I was talking to one guy this week and he said, well, I'm going to wait for the market to drop more, but you don't know if it's going to drop more. The bargains are already there. I'm not saying you go in with your whole wad, but I think you got to start scaling in on some of these things if you like them. If you like uranium, you're getting some bargains. Okay? I'm going to show a chart of Cameco later. I mean, you're not going to see these prices again, in my view. And nothing's changed in the nuclear power industry or the uranium supply demand situation. That's an example I like to use because it's so obvious where the principle that I'm talking about controlling emotions, using the forced selling to your advantage, the margin clerk liquidating your neighbor becomes a setup for you that in 3 or 4 years pays off exponentially. So let's talk about the oil wars update. Very interesting what's happening here. Oil has crashed. Saudi Arabia got ticked off that the Russians wouldn't go along with the cuts, and Russia's had enough. Let's look at this. You have to understand the thinking, and I've analyzed this. I don't know if my analysis is correct, but I know a lot of Russians. I spend time in Russia, in Ukraine, and I watch Putin. I watch Russian news reports and their talk shows, political talk shows. They have a different mentality about things. The people in Russia and the government there are there in their mind to represent Russia's interests, not the interests of Saudi Arabia or the United States. Okay, that's just how it is. I mean, is that some kind of newsflash for most people that these people in these different countries are interested in their own interests first? That's what we've been talking about, the rise of populism and nationalism around the world, where you put your nation and your people first. So what's happened over the last, I don't know, 10, almost 20 years now, Russia's been vilified continuously. Russia wanted to enter the world community after the decline of the Soviet Union and all the oligarchs and all that. And we still have this Hollywood caricature of them, like it's the Cold War, and they're the bad guys and we're the good guys, and Red Dawn, that movie, and all that crap. And Russia has interests in its sphere of influence. It wants to be influential. It wants to be a player on the world stage. And its economy is not only about 5% of what the U.S.'s economy is as far as GDP. It's a primarily commodity-based economy, although that's changing. But you have a lot of smart people there. Yes, they have problems, but everywhere they've turned around, we've put sanctions on them, and now you're messing around with Nord Stream 2, which is a gas pipeline that leaves Russia, goes through the Baltic to Europe to deliver natural gas. Well, we're exporters of natural gas in the U.S., and we want to export gas to Europe. We want them to be a customer, and so we're competing with the Russians. So various geopolitical games are played so that we can get an advantage for the United States, because people in the United States that are in charge, the oligarchy here, is interested in advancing its interests, just like the oligarchy government in Russia is interested in advancing its interests. So they're competing interests. And then you throw in things like, Syria and what's going on there, which most people in the United States have no freaking clue what's going on there. And so, it was in the advantage of the Russians for a certain amount of time to cooperate with the Saudis and the other OPEC members in having cuts. But it finally dawned on the Russians, it's like, okay, why are we doing this? We cut again. All we're going to do is U.S. shale's still going to be there, and that's the real problem, right? Notwithstanding the fact that now, if you read Putin's master thesis, it was done on the use of Russia's natural resources for it to become more relevant again on the world stage. So it starts to fit together, right? So what you're seeing is the Russians basically can kill two birds with one stone. First of all, the Russians really can't cut as easily as the Saudis can, okay? Most of their oil fields are in areas that are very inhospitable, that are very cold. They just can't cut to the tune that some people think. They could actually ruin cause damage to their oil wells and oil fields. It's not as easy as people think. So that's number one. Number two, they see that U.S. shale was already suffering at the prices before, $50, $55. And these shale companies are not making money. In 2014, last time when the Saudis tried to run shale off, the banks and investors came in and bailed shale out, and they weren't able to do it. Well, that's not going to happen again. There is no more money. These things since then still didn't make any money, still didn't cash flow properly. There's not going to be a bailout. There's no more loans. The equity, some of these things are down 80, 90%. You're not going to issue equity. And guess what? Twice a year, these oil companies have to go sit in front of their banks and review their revolvers. And it's like, okay, well, at $32 a barrel, guys, how do you pay back this loan we gave you or this revolver? They're going to cut back their revolvers. They're going to start calling loans possibly. And it's going to be, a run for the exit. First one out, get something. Or you get 10 cents in a dollar in a bankruptcy court. So, and the Russians see that. It's like, you know what? We're tired of being the patsy. We've spent the last 10 years strengthening our balance sheet. You know, the debt to GDP ratio in Russia is like 10% or 15%. They've been buying gold for the last 15 years. They have huge gold reserves. Their finances are a lot better than they are. Now, is this going to be painful for them? Yes. Is it going to be painful for the Saudis? Yes, more painful in my view. So the Saudis are going to think that, I believe that if they do this and flood the world with oil, that they can bring the Russians back to the table. And you know, but I don't think this is going to be resolved in a couple weeks. I think that this is going to go on, and I think that Shale is going to be the ultimate main victim of this. I also think it's possible that Mohammed bin Salam, or whatever his name is, MBS, the young new guy over there in Saudi Arabia, he's been rounding up a lot of his cousins and stuff and putting them in jail or bumping them off, because I think that, you know, some of the old line guys might just say, we've had enough of this kid. He's, you know, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia needs $80, $85 a barrel oil to balance its finances. This cannot go on for long for Saudi Arabia, or it's going to be big trouble. So there's a lot of things in play. That's my view on it. The Russians now saw an opportunity. Yes, it's short-term pain, but they can stick the fork finally in shale. I mean, I'm really interested to see, you know, how fast. I mean, you're already seeing announcements like by Parsley and Diamondback Energy. They're cutting back their rig count already. There's, I mean, it's the Red Queen's race. We've talked about this. If you're not drilling more wells out there, you know, you can't forget about increasing production. You can't maintain production. Okay, so one of two things happens if this goes on for 6 months or a year. Production is going to drop off significantly in the Permian, and you start to absorb some of this new supply. And another thing is, you know, I don't think the Saudis can pump as much as they're saying. Their oil fields are not in the best condition either. They're 40, 50, 60 years old, and them talking about pumping 13 million barrels a day or whatever, some crazy numbers. I'm not sure that's the case, but we'll see. It's a developing situation. I don't think, you know, you can be buying oil stocks right now. I don't think the bottom's in yet. We'll have to see. But certainly right now, offshore is not investable. I mean, I don't own any offshore drillers in my portfolio. There's a good chance that a good portion of them are probably going to go into receivership again and go through the bankruptcy process. I mean, there's not going to be any investment in it. I mean, I thought this was the year was really going to turn around, and at $65 a barrel, it probably would have. But we can't lament what might have been. We have to face reality. Who is going to go out and commit funds when this is what you've got hanging over the market? You have a demand shock because of coronavirus, and now the Saudis have went nuts and are going to flood the world with oil. The silver lining to all this, though, longer term, is that investment in new reserves and production will likely crash again. And the problem is geology doesn't go away. The laws of, you know, physics and geology and earth sciences don't change because of this. Yes, in the short term, these countries can pump more oil, but we are simply not, as a world now, replacing the production that we are using up. You know, I've shown this chart before. It's from an old chart from there's probably a more accurate one for 2019, but you can see, you know, this is the percentage of global replacement of what you've pumped. So as you pump 36 billion barrels of oil a year, in 2018, you only replaced 7% of that. Last year it was 4%. You only replaced 4% of the oil that was used in that year. And I've said this before, this is an extractive industry. If you do not replace the reserves that you remove, at some point you go out of business. We are setting up, I don't know when it's going to happen, 2021, 22, 23, I do not know. We are going to have record high oil prices again. We are going to have a shortage of oil. There simply has not been enough investment. And when you crash the price of oil like the Saudis are doing, that's not going to stimulate investment in non-OPEC oil sources. It's just that simple. So, yes, we got burned on this one. It's just the nature of the business. We'll have to, you know, see how it works out and come back at some point when things turn around. Maybe this thing does resolve itself in a week, but I don't think with the Saudis liquidating their above ground stocks and going for broke, I don't think this is going to get resolved in 1 or 2 weeks. I think this goes on for 6 months or so, maybe a year. and we could see these low oil prices for some time, which is a boon to some oil-consuming countries like India, which is a net importer, China, and that could be, once this coronavirus thing goes away, that could be very good for those economies. So don't forget the facts. Do second order thinking. Everybody, I guess if you wanted to, you could maybe look at some companies, some of the big majors. But I mean, they're almost like self-liquidating now, and these ridiculous comments, like by the CEO of Royal Dutch Shell, that they're going to move into green. But I guess you could buy them because the dividend yields are like 7 or 8, 9%. But they're probably going to have to cut them if the cash flows get constricted. So I don't know. I just think you stay away from that right now. There's no reason to go near it. It's kind of hard to game it out right now. One area of oil, one thing that you can do, and here we get into second and third order thinking. So the average person has no clue what's going on. So if you're producing all of this oil, extra oil, and the demands went down, what do you do with it? Because it ain't going and being used, all of it. So you got to store it. So what happens, it's called floating storage. And what happens is the one clear winner from this mess is crude oil tankers. Rates for very large crude carriers have rapidly spiked. I think they've went higher. I've seen fixtures in the end of last week. We've seen some tankers get chartered at $400,000 a day. So we've seen it go, before this crisis with the oil market, you were seeing VLCC rates around $35,000 per day. Now we're up 10 times, and some of these tankers are like 15 years old. How do I know this? Because I follow smart guys on Twitter that their life revolves around this. I get real-time information. You got to follow me on Twitter and get into my circle of who I'm following. This is how I find out these opportunities. So, rates you want to stick with the very large crude carriers, okay? Companies that have these, because these are the tankers that carry like 2 million barrels plus. And what has happened now is oil is now in contango. What does that mean? That means the future price, if you go into the futures market, the future price down the road is higher than the current price. So for an example, say you had a commodity, let's just say for oil to make it simple, say I didn't look at the futures, I should have, but just say, for example, the current spot price of oil is 32. You may have a price out in the future for a month or two, it may be 35. So there's a $3 difference. So what you can do is buy crude at current prices and store it and then resell it in the future. Or you can even, by using futures, you can capture this contango, okay? You can deliver that oil in the future say in a month or two when that futures contract, and what do you do with it in the meantime? Well, you charter a very large crude carrier and you store it on there. So when oil's in contango, this is very good for storage of oil because the demand's gone down, but now they're going to jack the supply. So tanker markets were already strong. We talked about that before because of the nature of the cyclicality of shipping. Tourist season ended in Q4, and rates started to come down as they normally do seasonally into Q1, but they were still higher. They were still about under 10-year highs, and all the tourists that don't know anything, the tourist season ended, and all the schlubs that didn't know anything thought that tanker rates were collapsing, which was not true. They go down in the first quarter, but they were still at relatively, 10-year highs, and now they're blowing out. We're seeing fixtures, $200, $300, $400,000 per day for 30, 60-day voyages. So what you're basically saying is some of these tanker companies can cash flow enough in a couple quarters to cover their entire market cap. Okay, let me say that again. That's extraordinary. That's why tankers and shipping, if you catch the cycle correctly, you can make a serious amount of money. Now, I'm not guaranteeing this is going to happen, but this is what's transpired in the last week. This is the lemonade from the lemon, if you will. Jay Mintzmeyer on Seeking Alpha wrote a nice article. He kind of tells you which tanker companies have the most, as a percentage of their fleet, VLCCs. I'll tell you that DHT Holdings, I think, has 100%. VLCCs, and companies have different size tankers, Suezmax, Aframax. With these high tanker rates, we're probably going to see that pull. The VLCC rates being so high, we'll probably see the Suezmax get pulled higher. But what I'm saying is you have to do a little bit of research here. In the Actionable Intelligence Alert newsletter, we have a tanker company that we think is pretty good. I've been buying these tanker stocks. They've been starting to move a little bit. A lot of them were up 10, 15% on Thursday and Friday. People are sniffing this out. So if you're interested, I think you should do some reading on this. And who better to read but Harris Kupperman, aka Kuppy. He wrote an excellent article on, tanker stocks again and what's going on in the market. I'll put a link in the show notes, so you may want to take a look at that as somewhere to put some money in an area where things are happening positively in such negativity. So gold has sold off quite a bit, and I've had people write me emails and say, "Well, I thought gold was a safe haven." Look, when the margin clerks, we have a liquidity issue right now, guys. So everything is being sold. I said that in the video back when I said we were in a bubble. When the stock market goes down, 95% of the stocks go down initially. Same thing with gold. Go look back at 2008. Everything gets sold when you have margin calls and you need liquidity to meet your margin calls. And things are having to be unwound right now because of that low volatility period and all the debt and bullshit trades that were built up in the system. Now that's getting unwound in real time, and everything gets sold. With the amount of, does anybody really think with doing $1.5 trillion repos in a space of a few days, like the Fed did, on top of the repo non-QE QE that was going on since last September, not to mention that every country in the world central bank has lowered rates because of this, and before this, I've showed that chart from the Council of Foreign Relations. This is the most loose the world's been in. Does anybody really think gold's going to keep going down? The initial sell-off, as we get through the liquidity crisis, this is what's happening. Believe me, I don't think a year or 2 years from now, gold's going to be it's going to be substantially higher in my view. Maybe we go into a deflationary depression and we can't come out. Then that maybe changes things. But like I've said, I expect these governments to print so much money to chop every tree down, trying to print the money they're gonna try to print to bail this thing out. So that's what you're seeing. Gold is going to go down in a liquidity crisis. It'll be one of the first things that recovers when the liquidity tsunami from these central banks and governments hits the shores. That's my view. That's what happened in 2008. We ended up making new all-time highs in gold in 2011 at $1,900 an ounce. Let's not forget what's really going on. So the world doesn't end, right? So India is going to increase its nuclear power fleet or ability to create nuclear electricity from nuclear power by 3 times in the next 10 years. India, which currently produces less than 2% of its electricity from nuclear power plants, is aiming to increase its nuclear power generation capacity by over 3 times in 10 years. I was talking this off this article I got. There are 9 nuclear power reactors which are targeted for completion by 24 to 25. Thus, 21 nuclear power reactors with an installed capacity of 15,700 megawatts are under implementation, envisioned for progressive completion by the year 2031. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the world hasn't ended, and the things that we're interested in and our theses are, in many cases, are still intact. So why do I bring that up? It's like, didn't we already talk about this? Yes, nuclear power is growing around the world outside of the US and Europe, because I'm telling you, this is why. This is a chart of Cameco, who's one of the largest uranium producers in the world, and look what's happened since well, this is the wrong chart, I believe. Yeah, I've got the wrong chart up, sorry. But anyways, you can go look at a current chart of Cameco. Disregard this. I got my charts mixed up. This is an old chart. But anyways, suffice to say, a lot of the things that we're interested in, like in uranium, are gotten even cheaper. So again, if the thesis didn't change, and you still have confidence that nuclear power is going to be a growth industry around the world. And I just read you an article where India, who is one of the largest, it's 1.4 billion people there, who's probably going to be trying to do what China did over the last 20 years. And, the growth is there, but the supply isn't. So that's what I'm trying. I think you have to step up and try to take advantage, these once in a decade opportunities. That's what we're looking at here, right? On some of these things, you're not, you don't get these opportunities. So this is where I think thinking rationally and thinking, I'm not saying you go in and say, yep, I'm going to blow my whole wad. I'm going to take a second mortgage on my house and go all in. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is you have to be a buyer here on some of these things, just because if you're a true contrarian, because the view doesn't change about what's going to happen. We still don't know the timing, but these things are going to pay off. It's not good. The thesis doesn't change. Coronavirus doesn't derail a nuclear power plant that's been planned for 5 years or 10 years and now under construction in India or China or these other places. So, but there's no new mines. So the price might drop because the margin clerk has stepped in and liquidated some holdings, and that gives you the opportunity to take advantage of that forced selling. That forced selling that somebody else, because they were over leveraged, is now forced just to hit the bid and there's no buyers, and so he has to take what he can get. That's your opportunity as a speculator. That's the point I'm trying to make. So this is kind of a long one today, guys. Like I said, I'm just one guy. It seems like people, I was getting a lot of email. People are like, when are you going to make a video? You need to make 2 videos a week. Look, guys, I mean, I am not too excited about this. I've been through these market drops before, and what I'm doing, what I've done in the past, look for the things that I want to buy, and I start picking away at them. You're not going to hit the exact bottom. Things, we could drop another 25, 30, could drop 50% of the Dow. I have no idea how far it's going to drop, but, these things that I'm buying now, like if you just want to go in and buy some, Cameco or uranium participation, you're getting a bargain. These tanker stocks, I mean, I don't care what happens with the Dow and everything else. If you are cash flowing your entire market cap in the next quarter or 6 months or a year, your stock is going to go up a lot. And remember what, Harris Kupperman, who's been through the last tanker cycle, some of the stocks can move, 20, 30, 50 times. Not, that's extraordinary. And so as long as these conditions are favorable in the market, we have to take advantage of them. So something to look at, some homework. I'll put links to the articles. Read them. There's a lot of smart people out there. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email. Bring them up in the comment section. I'm working a lot of hours still, but I still try to answer and look at the comments and try to respond where I can. So I'm not going to give you a lot of. I gave you some ideas here. Let's see. I mean, I'll put the article to Jay Mintzmeyer. I got this out of his article. It just gives you some homework here if you're interested. You probably need to take a look at some of these. I'm not going to say which one to buy or which ones I'm buying or not buying, which is good and not good. I'm just saying that this is what's happening. So appreciate the support and all the new listeners that are coming on board. I hope you're getting something out of this. And, we'll just batten down the hatches, prepare for rough seas. We'll get through this, and on the other side is going to be a better day. So thanks a lot, guys. We'll talk to you next week.